I don't have my mask on. Hey, do you guys know where the XR room is?
No.
Hey, Tim, can you do me a favor? Can you just walk them over to the XR?
Yeah, right.
Scott Lawrence is that's where you guys are.
Okay.
Teresa is.
And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Tech Talk. Hi, my name is Mike with Showy Professional. I'm joined today with by Brad Haynes, with also with Showy Professional. How's it going, Brad?
Oh, good. Good morning.
I've also got some special guests out there today. This is I've got Gil Perron with LSM in Canada, and Terry Jackson. He's the VP of Lighting. Actually, he's like the lighting czar at World Stage. How's it going, guys?
It's going well, thank you.
So actually, I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourself a little bit. Jill, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you come to us today.
Well, I'm the creative director at LSM, as you mentioned, and I've been working in the field for 35 years. Started pushing road cases, wound up working on a tour with a great LD that really taught me a lot. Went to school, then woke up one morning working on movies instead of rock and roll, then music videos, then a little bit of TV, and then back to rock and roll, and then doing major corporate stuff with L'Oreal, which is one of my biggest caregivers, if I could call it that. And then LSM in 2016, and here we are.
Cool.
Good way to wake
up. Terry, tell us about a little bit about your journey into the world of broadcast lighting.
Well, I was an actor many years ago for about 5 minutes, and quickly realized that I couldn't pay my bills doing that. So I started as a theater electrician and lighting designer back in Los Angeles. Went on tour for many years, landed in New York in about 1997 when I decided to retire the wrench. So no more touring for me. I jumped on the show Blue Man Group. I was the electrician on Blue Man Group for about 5 years in New York before leaving that and jumping into broadcast television lighting. And it's been I haven't looked back since.
Cool. So a little bit we've been talking about over the past couple months is this massive transition that we've seen from mostly live stuff to a lot more stuff we're doing, either a combination of live and broadcast, or where things are going almost strictly to a broadcast feel. Last month, my last Tech Talk last month, we talked towards the end of the discussion quite a bit about how in the house of worship market, you're seeing people that are doing a lot of work where they're taking their worship facility and trying to bring it online for online viewers. And some of the challenges that people have seen as far as trying to make it look good, because that transition from live, where you're just sitting in the room and watching it, to trying to make that same thing look good on broadcast, or trying to make it look good in both places, is a bit of a challenge. I know, Gilles, this is something that you've been experiencing quite a bit. So if you could tell us a little bit about, trying to maintain your design integrity from a stage performance that's live to a broadcast, or situations where you're trying to have it look good live as well as broadcast. Tell us a little bit about how you're maintaining that design integrity.
Well, first off, our market, which is Eastern Canada, because of the COVID rules, there wasn't really a transition between audience and no audience. It was right to no audience. So that kind of simplified the situation a little bit, because lighting for audience and lighting for camera are two very different approaches. And an hybrid of two is, I find, doubly challenging. So I was kind of lucky in the sense that I could just light for broadcast and not worry about an audience. We could just invade a theater or a venue and put stuff everywhere and not worry about seating arrangements or whatever. For people that are doing an hybrid, it's a bit of a challenge. But for me, what was the most revealing is the fact that the camera culture really evolved in the last 25 years. When I first started, and I think that's kind of relevant, when I first started, it wasn't rare for a TV show to be working at 200 to 250 foot candles to have a decent lighting package. And Terry, in another conversation, mentioned working with tungsten light. You could have imagined the heat those things propagated, the audio challenges because of ventilation and whatever. So as camera evolved, so did the lighting need become simpler. Today, there are productions going on right now today for broadcast television, and I'm not even talking about webcasting, that work at 10 to 15 foot candles. This is so dark. This is so dark that you have to actually work with a mag light to walk around the studio. And still on camera, it looks great. So why I'm bringing this up, and then I'll be done, is that with the evolution of cameras came the simplification of the needs. So now you can take an entry-level LED light and light a set with it without issues. When people work, especially in the worship market, you see a lot of cameras like the EVA1 from Panasonic or the C200s from Canon. Those cameras are outstanding for under $10,000. So I'm not talking about the front light now and the key lights, but with regards to concert lighting, you can get away with a lot.
Right. So does that make it easier for, like, if you're trying to create like a dramatic look, or where you've got a down shaft of light on
Yes.
on talent, and then you've got a blue surround with haze and all. So,
Yes.
so trying to reproduce those effects becomes a lot easier because you have camera technology that allows for you to shoot in dimmer light.
Yes. However, not everybody's already on board with this camera system or these HDR cameras or whatever. A lot of people, especially now with COVID, they're using robot cameras. And even the better cameras, I'm going to drop names here, but the Pana, for example, the Pana 120 or the Pana 130, which are very standard for webcasting, they're not that great in low light. They get noisy a little bit, and you don't have that much control over the color balancing. So you got to be careful with your key lights. And this is where stage people tend to stumble. You see, when you have an audience facing the stage, you have one point of view. And in camera measurement world, we call that the observer. So when you have a one point of view, like a rock show, you don't care if it's not perfectly lit from the side or whatever. So, and then people say, well, we're going to learn. I read about 3-point lighting, front, side, and back. That's great from the one observer angle. But when you have multiple cameras, each of these cameras required multiple point lighting. So my solution has been to use got to be careful with my wording, a crap load of movers, just throw them up there. And then whatever the talent showing up on stage does for the broadcast, it's a very NBC approach for people that work in television. Like, you don't really wonder too much about what will be going on, because all these movers can become key lights or effects lights.
Right.
So that's a kind of a cheat, but it works really well when you have movers that offer you a quality of light that's good enough to be a key light. Right. Not all movers offer that. Some do. Not trying to get into the brand, sorry, but I'm a big proponent of the Chauvet Maverick 3 because of that, and the Maverick Silence, obviously. Other brands have decent offerings too, but nothing really rivals this because of the CRI drop-ins and stuff like that. But to me, lighting a concert today for camera is completely different than what it was 10 years ago, or how you would shoot a festival lighting. Because people watching on a screen, they don't want our shadows. It's got to feel TV-like. Versus when you're watching a live concert on screen, you expect these strobe lights and the blackouts and the shadow because it's expected.
Right. Do you feel that, I'm sorry, Michael, do you feel, Gil, do you feel that you're using more fixtures these days because of the power savings and just the sort of the quality of fixture?
Yes. As many fixtures as the vendor can provide within the operational budget, there is strength in numbers. There will always be strength in numbers. Less is not more when it comes to lighting.
Right. So Terry, would you say that you've seen similar experience with that, or as far as like that transition, or?
Yes, I do see there are probably within the last like 4 or 5 years, there's probably, I would say 50% more fixtures on a standard theatrical or broadcast production, and it's because you can get more. A lot of the LDs these days, especially, we all know about the evolution of the LED and the fixture and sort of the quality that wasn't quite there, and it never really lived up to the promises of what we were talking about, or rather hoping for, 5 years ago. And now it does. And now there's such a variety of fixtures that are out there that can handle sort of the workload. They can get the color temperatures. The LDs are a lot more happier with them. Some LDs do have their preferences, that's for sure. But having a variety of fixture and volume has been key to the broadcast industry these days, in my opinion.
Cool. So
it's a good thing. Seems like we need to just put a bunch of lights in these places.
So when it comes to as far as and I hear a lot of things about CRI, how important CRI is, but we all know that CRI is kind of an older measurement. So what do you guys do as far as when you're looking at some of these newer cameras that obviously aren't thinking CRI, they're thinking along other lines like CQS? How do you Terry, for you, is that a big consideration when you're thinking about which lights you guys want to put into your stock? I mean, how do you guys consider, if you take color measurement into consideration, noise levels into consideration, what are your big requirements when you're looking at adding fixtures to your inventory?
Well, it's a multi-level answer that I'm about to give you, because in the not being on the designer side of things anymore and being on the rental vendor side of things, we have to take into considerations having to deal with multiple lighting designers and productions, all with different needs. So yeah, the high CRI is definitely has been a selling point for us. Everybody's asking for it, and my personal inventory, durability of fixture is another key factor for us. But like Joe was saying, it's like there's so many fixtures out there, and the intensity has been dialed so low that you can pretty much get away with anything. And the differentiation becomes the quality of light. The quality of light and the ease of use, really is the sort of the selling point.
So has that changed a lot? Like, Jill mentioned there being, sort of those challenges to deal with, especially when you're dealing with, having to have a certain amount of foot candles for more of a, the live broadcast in one aspect, and then with the web broadcast being much different. Like, I guess my question is technology there for you? Has it changed now that there have been so many more hybrids of these broadcasts? Because correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you have to do web and you have to do some of these video things at the same time. And so that balancing act of where the technology is, what else are you contending with, and what's not there technology wise that you wish can kind of help this out?
Smaller, that's a very small question, a big question there, Brett. Smaller fixtures obviously is key to a lot of these spaces. We're not in, a lot of the studios that are larger anymore. Sometimes we're in an office, with an 8-foot ceiling or a 12-foot ceiling. So you can't have those large lights, come into play. So, so the fixtures that you have, they have to serve, multiple purposes. They have to be, of quality, and the color, temperature, and the quality needs to be there. The size factor is key as well. And sort of, listen, these days when the folks in the shaders and everybody can sort of dial in, and what Joe was saying about the camera, with these new cameras, you can sort of dial in. You can fix a lot of issues with lighting fixtures. I think the secret is to minimize those needed fixes. So if we can come across, a fixture that does a lot of the work before you get on camera, is probably key.
If I could add to that, I would say that, to me, to answer your question, Brad, it's all about consistency. And as an example, a lot of these people that are a lot of people that are trying to do webcasting, but we're not technically ready, can't invest in the package, the camera package, the recording. So a lot of people, we can't lie about it, they've been buying a lot of those lights on Amazons, for example. Those LED lights that you can buy for $125, and at first glance, they're actually surprisingly good. But these lights are so inconsistent from turn on to turn on, that a person will say, okay, could you come in and do a balance for me? I do that. I consult on light balance. I'll come in, we'll do a white light balance. 2 days later, a person says, hey, I'm all green or I'm all pink, because the consistency is very important. And when you have a good camera system with good either CCUs, which are the more classic analog ones, or CCS, which are the digital ones, you can see these color shifts and correct them in camera, right? High-end cameras, you don't have to do the green shift in light. You can do it in camera, as long as your set pieces aren't too saturated, and then you wind up affecting the set pieces or the clothing, right? But just to finish up on the CRI discussion, obviously CRI is an outdated metric. We learned that from Brad a few months ago, but it's still a very common discussion point, right? People will mention, oh, my CRI is this and that, and not. I know this is off topic, but eventually, Brad and Mike, you'll have to talk about how competitors and all manufacturers do what we call gaming, because a lot of people don't know about gaming, and gaming is the way.
Nobody does that.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm joking. Nobody does it.
It's not the biggest gaming. It's how people adjust their LEDs so that when they do their CRI readings, they're through the roof. But then when you look at other metrics like SSI or TLCI or please TM30, you're going, okay, what's going on here, right? Light meters, which are very common now, resolve that. You can't lie to this guy, right? but they're expensive, so not that many people have them. But me, if I call a vendor, or if it's an LSM project, and it's not about client expectations, it's more about my own.
Yep.
So I gotta be able to spec a product that won't bite me in the butt.
Yeah. And that's, going back to that, that's why, by the way, go watch that tech talk if you want. But the reason bringing awareness to it is just to educate, more and more out there. Because, while there could be, and it maybe is some gaming out there, it's just to say, hey, that's sort of still an incomplete metric. Go look at this other things that tells you a little bit more of the story, so you can, make your determinations off of that. So yeah, I totally understand what you're saying there for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why consistency is kind of vital, right?
Yep.
So one of the things we were talking about earlier, we keep on talking about consistency. So if you look at people that are switching from tungsten over to LED, would you say that the experience now is better? Terry, I know that this is something that you guys do a lot. So, so when you're making those transitions from tungsten to LED, are there things that lighting people have to think about differently, or is it a different approach?
Yeah, there's a different approach, and we sort of leave that to the designer, preference and such. I mean, definitely one of the approaches that that needs to be taken into consideration is the cost. Obviously, an LED fixture is much more expensive than a tungsten fixture. The process is definitely coming down. I mean, they are not apples to apples yet, but they're getting closer. So that, I mean, that's I'm looking at it from my side. That's probably more of a question for Jill, because we leave it to the designers to it's their preference and their choice.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because you talked about the TV show, but the first time I walked into 6H at the NBC, which you probably know very well.
Yep.
It's about what, 6 years ago or 7 years ago, and there was still a ton of Altman 360Q Lecos.
Yeah.
Which are about 50 years old, right? So that's a challenge for the LED culture, because no LED light will have the lifespan of the old tungsten light. So your return on investment, even as a rental shop, is a challenge, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, because people still use the Altman 360Q in some instances, and those
they still work. People have won Tonys and Emmys and Oscars.
Who hasn't gone into an auditorium with old Kliegel FOHs or Strand Electric or stuff like that, right? A lot of the young guys watching are going, "What's a Strand Electric?" But so it's nice to have new products, right? It's nice to introduce new products, but for a rental or even for a venue, we gotta understand that we can't always have the new toy, and sometimes we gotta work with the older toys. Not three days ago, a colleague designer for a big TV show called me and asked me, "Hey, when we did that, I had a little powwow a month ago about with other LDs looking at the future of studio lighting in Montreal, and Chauvet sent me a product called the Pixes, which I really fell in love with, right?" And the guy said, "Oh, I'd like to have some eye candy product," because we didn't discuss that. But a lot of TV shows, we use a lot of these lights as eye candy, right, not as production lighting, right? And the Pixes was a great example of that. But how can the vendor buy Pixes for a month and a half production run? He just can't.
Well, yeah, and you're right, and it's funny because we were in a situation a couple of years ago where that Pixels came into play, and it was very successful for us. But when you talk about the eye candy, it's more than that. I mean, you have to look at it it needs to be functional in more than one area. So yeah, eye candy, but it also has to, it has to come to the party with, sometimes key lighting. You wouldn't use that as a key light, but that's as an example. multi-purpose and multifunctional, because moving beyond the broadcast and beyond the theater, you're into special events, you're into corporate and whatever. And from the rental side, we try to choose fixtures that can work across more than one platform and more than one area. So we make those decisions with care and a lot of research and input from designers and the industry at large.
That's a great point, and that kind of leads me to a next question that, we talked a little bit about, the kinds of lights, LED versus this, and then Jill, a little bit ago, you brought up like the set design. So from both perspectives, I would love to see, like, walk me through a new project. Like someone comes and says, hey, we've done this, now we want to put this on camera. There are certain, challenges that come with that. And I would have done it this way if it was live. What do I then think of right immediately? I have to think about set pieces. I have to think about video walls, kind of walk me through that process when you start.
That was for me?
That's for both, but
yeah, okay.
I know you love to jump in. Go for it.
I tend to take a lot of space. My market, Eastern Canada, we're not the house of worship is not a big culture here, so I don't have the experience lighting up house of worship projects at all. But I have done some research, and I find that a lot of these bigger venues have a lot of props to light and very big spaces. I work in a pretty inverted type of environment, right? Studio spaces tend to look big, but if you ever walked into a news studio, it kind of looks big, but it's actually pretty small. So,
yeah.
but there's a theater in Quebec City where I was asked to go by and discuss color quality with the technical director and the house designer. And again, they were evaluating different products. One of them was a Chauvet product, and they were looking at. They have a lot of. It's a very high-end theater, but there's a lot of wood architectural pieces in the theater. Since the stage was empty, I asked them to flip the lighting around to light up the wood grain on the walls. And there were 6 other brands of lighting being evaluated. I was evaluating all of them. I wasn't there for Chauvet. I was just there to look at them. And everything looked great until we turned, I'm going to say it, the Maverick 3 around and dropped the CIR filter in. And then the wood grain just went boom. And even experienced lighting people had no idea what just happened. Because lighting sets, talk to any set designer, or in my case with L'Oreal, colorists, people that do hair color, because that's my specialty is to light hair, okay? Right. And cars, go figure. But when you need to have the proper color come out, and when I'm talking about a variant on the proper color, a set designer, I'm sure Terry has experience with costume designers or set designers that,
yeah, for sure.
That just think about a production like on Broadway, like Hamilton, with a lot of earthy tones, right? All the browns are a nightmare to color.
Yeah.
So I'm off topic, but I'm saying that the better your light is to render color, the better it'll be for skin tones and for olives. Because if people are aware a bit of the CRI story, right? The American side of CRI was only 8 colors. Brad, stop me when I'm going too far, okay? Because I'm looking at you right now. So, and that's what the gaming discussion is about, right? When you take the original Matrix, it's only 8 colors, which doesn't even include skin tones. Then we went to extended, right? And added 3 colors. Still not enough. So now with the 15 to 18 color Matrix, CRI is a little better. and that involved olive skin tones for Asian people and the browner skin tones for, and it's not about black people, it's about earth colors, right?
Mhm.
But if a light cannot cover that gamut, it's gonna look like crap.
Right. Excuse
Any
me, when did you,
consistency escape. Yep.
right. When did you, so Joe, with that, when do you figure this out? Like, do you, like, how much research do you do before a fixture gets into your hands and onto the set? Because it seems
Okay,
like to me,
well,
like a lot of productions that I've worked on, there's a lot of figuring that out once you're in the environment, once all the elements are in, the set is in, you know, the host is in, and or whatever. Like, when do you figure that out?
well, like you, I come from the tungsten world, and there's no equivalent to tungsten lighting. There isn't.
I agree.
When I started working on sets with HMI is the best, purest white there is, but it can be a challenge for skin tones. Because if you're using, and now I'm going to go way back, the DOP that I work with the most, back in the film era, work with you might be aware of that, but a stock from Kodak called K56, which was very brown, because people don't know that, but film stocks during the film area, you could have a Fuji film, which was higher in the greens for special effects movies, and browns with Kodak was where movies like, for example, Robin Hood were shot on K56 because they were very earthy. So you have to work your lights for that, right? Maxi Brutes from Mole Richardson, you know, that big box with the 8 pars, or I'm sorry, the 9 pars or 12 pars. The reason these things existed was because the tungsten just pulled out the color, right? So to answer your question, when is I've evolved in it. And again, I'm blessed to have a relationship with Chauvet, but when the Maverick 3 was in inception or in design, there were a lot of back and forths with, I worked through a distributor, which is great in Canada, called Jam Industries. And there was a lot of back and forth where I was begging them to have some kind of control over the light, because the issue with having a CRI filter is that you lose a lot of output on the light. Is that okay if I bring that up, Brad?
Yeah, sure.
So let's just say you have a 40,000, a 50,000
Sure,
lumen
that's fine. Yeah.
engine, just for discussion. You have a 50,000 lumen engine, and then you say, okay, we're gonna correct it to pure CRI in engine. You just lost 20,000 lumens, right?
Yeah, the output
Then you
drops.
talk to a rock and roll guy that doesn't care about CRI, just wants to backlight the band. He tells you, dude, don't take my output away. I want to do rock and roll shows, right?
Mhm.
Meanwhile, I'm saying, screw you, Melon, I want my CRI. But mid-market rental companies, am I losing it here?
No,
You're right on
The
point.
mid-market company, the company like the company that has 200 to 500 lights, no more, okay, movers. They can't afford to have 3 stocks. So I remember having long discussions with my guy saying, what if we could have a light, my guy being over there, but what if we could have a light that could cover the rock and roll LD, give maximum output, and also suffice for theatrical or studio needs?
Yeah.
As of yet, only one manufacturer offers that. As of yet, still, and
it's 20 pounds less. So
well, I don't. But here's the thing: for a company like LSM, which I work with now full time, there was no other option, because as a mid-market company, the company could not afford to have 2 stocks of lights, right?
Right.
So, and now we add, well, you know what? It might be doing theater, so maybe we need shutters. And also, it'd be great if the color, the reds were the same reds across the board from product to product.
Right.
So faster to adjust. And what if I could have what if I could have less noise sometimes in events where I'm not using full power on the light? Is there a way for me to drop some fans within the light through software? All these things are being answered by one manufacturer for me,
Mm-hmm.
and it widens the gamut.
Yep.
So it's moving from, you're moving from specialty fixture to, you know, fixtures that can do, you know, multiple, you know, outputs and such, through more of a hybrid. Not, don't want to call it hybrid, but more of a variety.
It's
you know,
hybrid.
of
The
functioning fixtures.
word is accurate. It's hybrid.
Yeah.
Because webcasts, you know, we're talking about TV broadcasts, but I'm sure 98% of the people watching us are more into the webcasting culture than the broadcasting culture.
Well, these days.
Yes. And it's not exactly the same, because obviously budgets are different.
Yep.
Applications are different. A lot of them are lighting corporate events, you know, that are doing these virtual corporate events, corporate meetings.
Mhm.
And, you know, they don't have a perfect grid, because in TV position, it's all about position.
Right.
That's the one thing, that's the elephant in the room in this discussion, is that trying to have a television quality lighting look on a front and back truss rig, it'll never happen. Because if you
So to that, I have it. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say to that, you know, and something that you talked about a little earlier, which I've always found fascinating, especially since all the lights came out from the beginning, was, you know, that form of eye candy. And it's been out there for a long time, you know, when the Aura came out and some of the other type of fixtures. And now we have the Pixis, like that you mentioned, and things like that. Do you find yourself, when you're fighting all these positions, having to, I got to tuck a few little eye candy type of fixtures in here? Or is it nice when the fixture does what you need to do, but still has some eye candy effects too? Like, are you specifying fixtures just for that?
No.
Yeah.
Eye candy, I mean, if a fixture can, if a fixture does both, that's great, but it will never be tasked for both. Or else I'm the worst designer on the planet.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not like, could you send me 44 or 48 lights and I'll see what I'll do with them? No, I mean, you got to go in with a plan, right? So, but going back to my first mention of throwing 36 Maverick 3s in the ceiling and not worrying about it, that was a specific show where it was a variety show over 9 weeks with COVID rules changing hour by hour. You know, I'm going to go in feet here: 6 feet, 10 feet, 9 feet, 3 feet.
Right.
And you know, is there anything more horrible than a band that's broken up over 50 feet wide? But that was the reality. So having movers everywhere and just saying, well, you know what, we'll live with it, because we can't afford to pay the union guys to go up and move the lights every half day, right? So that was different. But generally speaking, the LD works with the set designer for a TV show, and he proposes lighting solutions within the set design. But like on a movie set, they're completely autonomous. They're run by the same guy, but they have different applications. And the DOP doesn't really care about the set, the eye candy, other than what they bring to the camera, right?
Right.
So, voila.
So Terry, for
It's
you,
been
kind of
interesting.
the same thing. So for you guys, when you're looking at, because I know you guys do a ton of project work. So when you're looking at project, you know, I know taking budget aside, you know, where do you guys like to be called in at? At what stage do you? Okay, two-part question. What stage do you like to be called in at, and what stage do you typically get called in at?
Well, we like to be called in as soon as possible, because you know, just in this market, there's so much competition for the fixtures, and you know, there's just a lot of work, or there was a lot of work. So we like to be called in as early as possible. Typically, realistically, if we get a project on the books like 2 months in advance, that'd be fantastic. in that situation, working with the designers and working with, production and figuring out what they actually need. Now, the reality of the situation is we may not get a call, we may, book a very large project with a 2-week notice or a week notice, and being able and being flexible enough to sort of roll with that is a challenge. And that's the reality of the situation. One of the things that Jill just said, working on a show with, over multiple weeks, a variety show or whatever, over multiple weeks, it's not like you can have the crew hanging a different picture every week and changing the look or whatever. So you have to sort of you got to hit it out of the park the first time or the second time, and come to the party with a fixture that could do multiple things. Like
Right.
We're saying the pictures, but a fixture like the pictures, an eye candy, but it can be used as a different function. Yeah, those are not. I agree with Joe. Those are not the same. They would never use the same. This in both ways on the same production.
Some lights do a good crossover,
Mhm.
but within one production, they won't ask to crossover. They'll be specific to that particular application. I would only assume that in a house of worship market, with these stage spaces being quite large, you wind up with an FOH package that you want to do a kind of a decent wash, couple of key lights, and then everything else is either backlight for camera or set dressing or effects. I can only assume that, but the only church I attended and visited in the States, it was enormous, and it was like 200 Licos in the front, right? Which would today not happen, in my opinion. You do
Right.
24 movers and you'd be okay, or maybe 48, but so.
And many are quite diverse and they change quite often, and the depth of field is something they have to think about often. So yeah, that is quite a dynamic, range that they have to kind of contend with, for sure. And by the way, we're mentioning that too, we are live. So if there's anybody in the chat room that has any questions, please do ask them to these wealth of knowledge these gentlemen bring.
That'd be great. Matter of fact, it's another thing we didn't touch on. I think that should apply to webcasting, which it doesn't. I find it doesn't yet because people that don't necessarily have the science, but you just said, depth of field. When you work with a really competent DOP, a guy of experience, he'll tell you, by the way, I'll be working at f4. That means he wants that background to be slightly blurry. He doesn't want it to be in sharp focus, right? So lighting for that is a little different than lighting for a big bright wash where you're working at f11. Now, some people might not even know what the difference between f2.8 and f16 is, but it's something that people should read up on, educate themselves on, and see how it improves the visual of a broadcast. Having control over your depth of field, control over your color casting, for example, and even what's the ratio of, if you're doing a certain amount of lighting as a key light, what's the ratio for backlight for it not to be like this right now? I'm a little too bright on top. Okay, right. So those are all things that if you want to do nice broadcast lighting, even for concerts, I wish you could see a picture that I sent you, because that was a good example where we needed to control. The DOP was very, very adamant about having it perfect. Okay, so we had to find that ratio between the front light and the back light. And if we were stuck in tungsten, for example, where I wound up working with the front light at maybe 20% output because the backlights were just not strong enough, I would have wound up with such an orange cast on my lighting, because as you know, the more you dim a tungsten light, the more orange or red it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to redo your white balance on camera. And then if you bring the light back up, then you have to redo it again. So, yeah. So I think that if people just learn the basics about how the camera responds to light, it'll really open up a bunch of creative ideas for them.
So a question just came in, and we've been talking about it, and we won't get too much here, but a person asked, we say CRI is outdated. So what should they be looking for in a fixture, front of house fixture, to ensure proper color temperature? And that question is a little open-ended, but I'll revert back to the expert there. But the whole idea too, and it's different because it's different whether it's live or it's on camera. It's how the colors are rendered. So that's basically what CRI and TM30 are doing. What I had talked about and kind of the back and forth is, how it over or under saturates colors. On camera, that's a little bit different. So can you just kind of give them sort of the broad overview of what they're looking for and what they should notice when they're looking for that, that proper, color temperature type of fixture?
Well, first of all, if your only matrix is CRI, then it's okay to work with CRI. As long as it's not the 8-level CRI, it should be called extended CRI from R1 to R15. If you can get these values on paper with R1 to R15s, and everything is as high as you can probably live with, then it's not so bad. The difference between CRI,
which is in most manufacturer specifications, just throwing that out there.
Now,
so definitely look for that. Yep.
I haven't seen I've only seen one guy still, an American manufacturer, still really hanging on to the 8-color CRI, but otherwise, a lot of people, people gave up. Why? So the question was, please remind me of the question, Brad.
Well, they basically want to know what is the best way for them to choose it. I mean, it's one thing to look at the specification and say, hey, the CRI is this, but the reason we've had that conversation about TM30 and things like that is it breaks it down and it shows you what colors, but
I think my first recommendation would be whatever lights you have in your FOH, make them all the same. Don't mix match products. I've read a lot, I'm a member of a group on Facebook, and I see a lot of people saying, well, we just bought 4 new lights for our FOH to add to our inventory. And when you start mix matching light, then it becomes a nightmare to try and have a matching light. If you have 48 lights that you bought, no matter what the CRI is, you buy 48 lights or 24 lights or 12 lights, and they're all the same. And then you put your little white cardboard in front, which is a bit of a no-no, but you put your little white cardboard and you do your white balance on camera. It'll be white-ish, but white. So it doesn't matter it doesn't matter. Where it becomes confusing is when you have mixed source lighting. That's when the proverbial craps hit the fan. Open a window, you're dead. Use UV lights, you're dead. So, but going back to the question, get the best light for the budget, number one, and just try and have the same light throughout your FOH, and you'll be okay.
Good. Consistency.
Exactly.
Consistency.
So
What do
Terry,
you think, Terry? I mean, obviously, go ahead, Mike.
No, actually, go ahead, because I think you're about to go the same direction I was going to go in. So go ahead.
Well, I was gonna follow that up with Terry and just say, obviously, Terry, I assume that you'll try to look for the thing that does the best kind of all around, so you can kind of hit those different areas. I mean, what are you looking for when you're looking at those specifications? I mean, there's numbers, sure. There's all these specification sheets of numbers, but how do you quantify that and say that's what I'm doing for?
Well, intensity and brightness for one. Color temperature. I'm sorry. The color output and the quality of the color. I think it was Jill or one of you guys said something about the reds, and the blues, and which used to be a lot more important. I think right now people are kind of coming to the party and everybody has a great red, and that wasn't always the case. So it's that. It's how bright it is, because we're talking about a mid-tier fixture. We don't do stadium jobs, so we don't have to worry about that. But we don't do a lot of theater jobs either. So, we're right in the middle of there. So we're trying to find a fixture that kind of fits, across multiple theatrical, applications. and cost.
Go ahead.
Because with cost comes volume. It's just kind of
Sure.
putting it out there.
Yeah.
If it's a more reasonable cost, we can get more and we can offer more. We're not going to buy 24 of anything. We're going to buy 50 of something or 100 of something, because to Joe's point, consistency of front of house or whatever it is, you need the volume. You need the quality fixture and the volume.
Another little cue that I could give to anybody trying to get good lighting on their broadcast or webcasting is that depending on the camera system you have, beware of saturates. Like if you're going pure green on your LED, especially for the backlights and for the set lighting, if you're doing pure saturates, pure green, pure red, pure blue, you're definitely going to have some saturations, especially if you're using older CCD cameras.
Great point. Yeah.
So that's another little cue that people tend to not know, that they're going, oh, why is my video so noisy? Or why is it blooming so much? Generally, it's just because the CCD cannot read the saturate. So pastels are a little more boring, but they're a safe place to be when you have older cameras.
So something just popped into my head when we're talking about saturate greens. So with the advent, especially with LED wash lights being what they are, usually they're multi-source, RGW, RGBA, or something of that nature. And then with moving heads, you have a white LED source and then CMY color mixing. Do you find blending the two worlds an issue? And if you do, how do you deal with that? I'm going to throw it to Terry first, because I know it's something that you guys deal with on a daily. So
say that again, Michael. Say the question again. I think I lost that question.
So with wash lights, LED wash lights, usually it's a multi-cell RGBW, RGBA, RGBAL something. Yep. And then with moving head spot and profiles, typically you're using a white LED and CMY color mixing. How do you blend those worlds? How do you deal with that?
Well, these days, having a straight up wash fixture, for us, it hasn't really worked for us. We do need that hybrid fixture. We need something that could, that can give a good wash and also have an edge to it. So that's kind of what we're looking at, and I think, a lot of the vendors, are going that route, where it's a fixture that can do multiple applications. Very rarely do we need something that is a straight up wash. We need to kind of blow it out with, light and have a wash fixture. So, definitely looking at more of the hybrid.
It's funny, Terry, that you say that, because me as a user or a person that specs lights, I would never spec even a discharge wash light was never a really big thing, because they were just too hard to color match, or didn't offer enough, either not enough saturation or, not enough control, or unless you would pay top dollar to get decent shutters within the light. It was never, so if I take an example especially the multi, how do you call it, with a bunch of LEDs,
multi-cell
LED light, it's not a wash light. It's an effects light. I mean, it's a wash light for a rock and roll show or for a variety show, but you don't wash a talent with that. You just don't. Okay. Unless you're working in unless you're doing something really creative and you don't. But I would never use that for the white of it.
Okay. Just curious, because it's something that just kind of popped into my head. I'm like, I wonder how you guys deal with this.
So another question came through, kind of keeping with that, is shout out Andre, how are you? With the COVID situation, there are a lot of webcasts and a lot of things that may be done by people that aren't as experienced, and so they are starting new. So I'll ask it this way: what would your recommendation be of just an effective setup if they have to use stuff that they've been using in a live situation? So they don't have the choice to go find maybe the best quality of light fixture. I hear consistency is obviously probably one of the first things you're going to say, but what do you think of that? Like they're starting out, if they're, they're a church that decided that they have to do more of their webcasting live now, or they're starting to do things on camera or webcast, what would you recommend first off?
Wow. That's a question I would have rather not have asked because wow. Actually, I'm going to stick Terry with that one. What would you recommend to a client asking that, Terry? Because my answer they won't like.
Well, tell me. So it depends on the application. If we're talking about something where you need, a larger throw, say more than 30 feet, then obviously, yeah, you're going to go with a moving fixture. You're going to go with an automated fixture with some shutters if you have it. But what I would recommend, like really, is for most of these applications, get yourself a good panel light, a good LED panel light. Whether it's there's several different brands out there, but get good light, because it's all about even and the field. And when you talk about, even with me right now, with moving toward the camera with the glasses and it catches the reflection, get stuff a nice even fixture. And
there's a catch to that, though. There is a catch to that.
Yep.
Panel lights are extremely short throw lights.
Right.
And when I say short throw, I mean 10 feet.
10 feet. You can get a little more punch.
Without going to, I'm going to use the brand name because it's a classic. I'm not talking about the Arri SC60 with the intensifier, because I think that's probably out of price for a lot of users, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I did mention that the Chinese stuff, it just doesn't do it. It just does not do it. But the light panels, I'm actually working now. My little workspace, I have 3 sky panels working right now. Okay.
Nice.
So if people want to see, I got one here, and there, and one there.
Yeah, but you're a little hot up top. You're a little hot.
I know I'm a little hot. I was too lazy this morning. So sorry about that. So, but the thing is, why I felt bad about, not right about saying that, I see that in the market that I'm in, people trying to retask the rock and roll lights to do broadcast or webcasting. Right. And not every light can be retasked. Not every light. I'm not talking about beams or racks of 6 or ACLs here. I'm talking about, I saw a person try to do key lighting with a Chauvet Q40 panel, and then calling me and saying, "Why are my cameras strobing?" Well, maybe at 10% or at 5% because it's so bright, you're flickering a little bit. So some people just don't have the gear to do it right. I'm sorry.
It is fascinating, and it gets to consistency, like you mentioned, Aki. But I think that this is a time more than ever where there is that awareness that as they try to do it with some of those fixtures, they realize that, oh my gosh, it's a different world here that we need to account for. And I think that's great that you've mentioned some of those things. They're still going to do it, and they need to, because those are the type of things that need to happen. They need to get out there. Right, exactly. So, if you were to give them and just kind of go there for a second, I love what you said, Terry, about finding a fixture that was consistency and just kind of does it evenly. What else would you just kind of give them? Like, just look for this, whether it's angles, whether it's whatever.
I've seen
consistency helps.
I've seen people do very decent small space studio lighting with fluorescence. With hardware store fluorescence, right? I mean, if you're creative and inventive, you can do miracles, no doubt, right?
Yes.
But don't take a Chinese wall washer, put RGB to max, and think you can do a key light with that. You won't.
No, not a good idea.
You won't do it well.
We call that
do
it. So get away with it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you'll know.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating because I think, with, lighting for live and then what we've done or what we've seen with a lot of way broadcasts are, it's getting more sophisticated. And it's really nice as a lighting nerd to see these two things starting to converge. We're talking convergence again. We talked about that. So I think there'll be some nice things that come about, So yeah, I'm very excited by all of that.
We had one last question before we jump out of here. So what are your guys' feelings on using Fresnels for key light and side light?
Fresnels are magic. Fresnels are magic. There's nothing beats a Fresnel for anything.
Yeah. No,
Cool.
they're super flexible and super clean, and
They look
you
good.
get the punch. Yeah.
A Fresnel is a pretty actually, even as a set piece, a Fresnel is beautiful, especially if you have the nice stipple glass on the 10 incher for an old strand or something like that. But even depending on the throw distance, it's a very smooth lighting, very easy to blend as a key light. As a side lighting, if you spot it a little bit, you'll get a little bit of that aura in the beam, but still a nice broad wash. And Fresnels are still a go-to thing for me. But get the right wattage. Get the right wattage. Don't get a 1K and dim it down to 10%.
Yeah, you said that earlier offline. Can you explain what you mean? Because I thought that was very interesting.
Well, I'm not going to tell you my story again, but I'm going to tell you. And it's pretty simple. Always get the output. I'm talking about in traditionals or tungsten or even tungsten incandescent. I'm not talking about LEDs or even discharge or whatever. I'm talking about tungsten. If you're working up close, and I'm not going to talk about foot candles now, but if you're working at normal decent lighting, get the wattage that most resembles. I'm sorry, I'm going to get back. Always try and work at 100% of your dimmer output. If a 500 watt Fresnel at 100% is almost what you need, but maybe a little too bright, you dim it down 10%, it's okay. But if you're putting a 1000 watt Fresnel or worse, 1K or 2K or whatever, then you're going to dim it so low that it's going to bring the redshift up so much that even when you color correct your camera, everything's going to become purple in the back.
Yeah.
It's called mirred shifting or Maillard shifting. Sorry, it's an old concept from the 60s for the old guys. But when you look at the light curve, when you look at the IEC light sphere, that little dot where you watch your color temperature, where it goes up and down, it's called the mirrored shift from green to magenta. So it's actually from blue to red. Won't get into why it's green to magenta, but it's blue to red. So the more you dim a tungsten, the more it'll shift to the reds. And that could be very damaging to your white balance. So Fresnels, yes, right wattage will give you magical results.
Right.
And that's why there are somebody once asked me, a young guy said, why do you have gray filters to put in front of Fresnels, right? For example, a Lee 209 or a Lee 210 or whatever. Well, it's because I don't want to dim them. I want to make them less bright, but without dimming.
Yep.
So, what?
All right, guys. Well, listen. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
I was gonna say that's something that I wish I had heard when I was younger, because trying to sort of the whole thing, give me enough yarn, I can knit you a sweater. It's not really the case. It's like stick to your guns and get the proper fixture. It's really solid advice.
I was really lucky.
I think.
No, I just wanted to say that I was really lucky, really young, to fall on some great mentors, and mentoring is the most important thing in a career. Getting good mentors.
Absolutely.
I agree, and I think it's up to guys like you guys to be able to talk to the generation of lighting people that are coming up through now, and that's why I think opportunities like this are great, and I hope that people take advantage of them.
Absolutely.
So, guys, just some parting thoughts. I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming out today. I really do appreciate taking your time out of your extraordinarily busy schedules to help us out. I really do appreciate it. We're going to be coming back to Tech Talk in 2 weeks. We're going to take next week off and come back the week after. We're going to be talking about more on the subject of in-studio lighting, but we're going to get into a little bit of incorporating video wall into scenic design, into scenic lighting. So stay tuned for announcements on that. And Gil and Terry, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. For everybody out there in the world, we're going to be hanging out in the background for a few more minutes. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and come up online now, and we'll do our best to answer them. If not, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. You're awesome.
People.